Hello and welcome along to the VMTV Rugby Pod as we review round 2. Alan Quinlan and Matt Williams, as ever, alongside me. For the breaking news, I'll come to you first, Alan. Warren Gatland looks like will step down or being pretty much no longer needed in the Wales role. 14 defeats in a row. Are you surprised that it's happened on a Tuesday morning? I know they were having a big meeting and halfway through a tournament, or not quite? Or was it inevitable and it was always going to happen, whether it was now or in 3 or 4 weeks' time?
A little bit surprised. I think when they backed him in November and decided that he would continue, I thought that, maybe just see out the rest of the Six Nations. But there's a lot of noise in Wales, isn't there? And a lot of comments on social media. And they're in a tough place at the moment. It's sad in a sense, to see Wales like that. They have a lot of young players. They've lost a lot of players in the last number of years, very significant, experienced players. So essentially it's a rebuild, but it goes deeper than that, I think, with the regions and other issues in the Welsh Rugby Union, and mainly comes down to, particularly with the regions, is they're struggling financially. And, so it's difficult for them to go out and sign marquee players or anything like that. And, so it's the overall package is pretty dark there at the moment, and I suppose the pressure of the results, and it is a results-driven business, has made this happen, and this is why it's happened. So I don't know who'd want the job. Who are they going to put in there? Now it's obvious that, obviously I think unless they have someone lined up, that they'll put in an interim coach there, or maybe from the current coaching staff, someone will take over. I don't know if that's going to change their fortunes. But it's a tough one on Gatti, because his record before the second time coming back was exceptional. He was the success he had brought them, winning championships and getting to World Cup semi-finals and all that kind of stuff, was second to none. He was Lions coach for a number of tours as well. So, it's difficult and it's dangerous to go back. And I think the player pool is just not strong enough there at the moment.
Matt, 6 wins in 26 tests. Their last victory coming against Georgia in the World Cup. The stats aren't great at all. And he did come back, as Alan talked about, Grand Slam winner, coach for years, probably 25 to 30 years at least. What do you make out of the whole situation? When speaking to him in the launch, he actually seemed quite positive, but 43-0 against the French and then against the Italians, yes, they rallied late on, but it really didn't look like anything was going to happen to that team. And, from minute one, they probably looked like they were going to lose. Do you feel it's the right time for him to move on?
Stuart, I think Gatti was doing. Now he's getting well paid. Everyone knows that. So let's not. But that is a very tough job. You look, as a coach, you go and you look at your team and you know where they are. Hey, listen, we're right in this championship. We've got a shot at it. He looked at his team in the days when he had Alan Wynne-Jones there as the leader, and that was a really good Welsh team. Liam Williams at his best. They had a lot of really strong players in that side, and that team won for a reason. This team is losing for a reason. I think Gatti's really came back to help Wales out. He knew they were in trouble, and he thought his experience and seniority could get him through a hard time. Let's remember, at the World Cup, they flogged Australia at the World Cup. So that it was going. But right now, minus those old players, this is a really. I don't want to be derogatory, but it's not a Welsh team with a lot of playing talent, especially across their back line. It is, their tens have been well below international standard in this tournament, and they have been all last year as well. Remember, 3 of those defeats were to Australia. Australia are not a great side at the moment. I feel for Gatti. A lot of people bag him. I don't. I've always had a lot of time for Warren. He was always a good guy to deal with, right back to the days when he was in Ireland when I first arrived. And he's had great success. And I feel for a guy that's given so much to the country. I know he's been well paid, but he's given so much to Wales that it ended like this. rather than him being able to walk out on his own terms. But that's the game, you know. It's a brutal game. The question is, you know, do Wales get a dead cat bounce against Ireland because of that? Do they bounce? Like, I can't see that happening. I can't see the change of coach having a major impact. Now, when we were on the show the other day, Rob and I were talking about it, and Rob's suggesting that some defensive systems need changing, and that's true. That's true. I'd agree with that. The way Wales let in their defensive structure, the way they let in that try off the scrum against Italy was very poor. That they were out of position. Italy saw they were out of position and pounced on it, and they scored a really beautiful try as it turned out from the scrum. So those sort of things can be changed, but ultimately, as Alan said, you go down into the depths of Welsh rugby, and the problems for this national team start way, way, way down the list. When's the last time a Welsh under-20 side put up some strong performances? When's the last time we saw the regions playing well? Was the region model the right model? I've always maintained that was the wrong model. Having played there for Swansea, you put Swansea and Neath together, they hated each other's guts, and yet they put them together. The whole system in Wales is not working for the good of the national side at the moment. So they've got, and it's sad, I agree with Alan, it's a sad day. It's not a day of any rejoicing. You know, Warren's been sacked. He's a guy's given his life to the game. Wales will come last in this championship, and I don't see any way forward for them in the short term.
Alan, the last one on this, you know, he changed it up with Rob Howley coming back in, Alex King coming out, left out Anscombe Llewellyn in the centre, playing at 12, at 10. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, and I'm sure he changed plenty if he could. But do you feel he maybe did make a few wrong calls, even in the squad leading up to the championship started?
Not particularly, no. I think overall the issue is player depth and quality.
So why would he play at 12 at 10? Like, you know, what do you see is the point in that?
Well, I think he's played 10 before at club level, but they're all very inexperienced. So again, you change that up, play Anscombe, doesn't make any difference. I think a lot of the problems are stemming from their power up front and that physical edge that they have. They're very lateral, they're very deep in attack. So, you know, you can pick through any of the selections you like, and I'll still go back to the same thing. And any coach that goes in there, there's going to be pain before there's any success. You know, it's going to take time. So it's yeah. Will they cause Ireland problems in a couple of weeks? Yeah, for sure. I think they'll come out firing. They'll hopefully get a bounce from that and be galvanized. And it's a tough place to go. The atmosphere is incredible there, the Principality Stadium. But ultimately, you know, Ireland have got to be ruthless and make sure their game is right. And look, it's a negative. I think some people. The thing about changing a manager, Stuart, for me, whether it's in the Premier League or whether it's in GA or whether it's in any other sports, if it's a playing style and it's you know, definitely, and you can get more out of top quality players, and I mean it respectfully, some of these Welsh players will be top internationals. I think Dafa Jenkins, the second row, is a superb player. Jack Morgan will go on the lines. Bolton in the back row, Wainwright, they're good players. You know, they're missing Dowie Lake. He's potentially be on a Lions tour as well. He's a superb hooker. But there's other areas that they're just very, very short in, and it's just that top quality. So it's, for me, it's not down to selections. It's down to, you know, player quality and the inexperience. We saw it in November. Players being picked with just a bunch of caps and you know, not even standout players for their region. So it's a very difficult one. It's a sad one, and the quicker they get back on track, the better for everybody.
Matt, Alan touched on Ireland there, winning on Sunday. Bonus point, 2 from 2. Only undefeated side left in the championship. There was a wee bit of nervousness going into Scotland, but they blew them away. Yes, Scotland came back, but in the end, Ireland showed their class, didn't they?
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff. First, I actually, before the game, I thought it might have been the last 20 where Ireland got away, but they started so fast and so dominant in the opening 30 minutes. I thought they played superbly, played with level heads, did everything just about perfectly in that opening scenario, and really Scotland never recovered from that. Obviously, the collision there that took their halves out, it's terrible. No one wanted to see that, and glad that they're relatively okay, But despite that, Ireland were dominant. I thought even though their line out didn't go like it did the other week, their ball carrying around the field was great. When their kicking game was excellent. Sam had a fantastic game. Sam Prendergast at 10. I thought they were really strong at the breakdown. Their passing was far more accurate in the opening stanza than it has been in the past. And once they got that more than 2 scores ahead, that's when Test match rugby becomes really tough. Now, to be fair to the Scots, that absolutely brilliantly athletically executed try just on half time probably made it interesting. Well, it did make it interesting. Like, it was how Van der Merwe twisted himself in the air like that was phenomenal, and Hugo Keaton shouldn't have come off him. But still, it wasn't enough. That Irish team, overcome all the adversity, did everything right, and the only team to win a game away from home in the first 2 rounds. It was an impressive day, a very impressive day, because Scotland, we all thought Scotland would put up more of a fight and that be better than that. But they only played as well as Ireland let them. I thought Ireland's defence was superb, and I know picking man of the match is a very, very difficult task, but I thought Andrew Porter was absolutely immense. I just thought as the way he played as a loose head prop was inspirational. It was truly a great performance from him that day. There's a lot of other guys there that deserve pats on the back as well. It was a superb day.
Just picking up off Matt's point, Alan, he named Porter, but Finlay Bealham, Prendergast player of the match, Caelan Doris, Hugo Keaton was great. You could name pretty much the whole 15 plus a few others on the bench. Such a good level, and Easterby must be delighted with the opening couple of games.
Yeah, it's a perfect scenario.
It's a perfect start for him, isn't it? It's
a perfect scenario after 2 games to get maximum points. I don't know if Matt will agree with this as a former coach, but it's actually not a bad thing to have some things to work on, because if you get perfect performances here, there's always a chance you might. Okay, you'd love to have them in some ways, but maybe when you have things to work on. And, obviously Wales is going to be tricky, and Ireland won't want to talk that up and start talking ahead to France or anything like that. But ultimately, we believe, and unless things dramatically change, that's the championship decider. It's a potential, championship decider, that game. And I think for Ireland in a couple of weeks, when that happens, you're not going to get away with the same errors and mistakes that they've made. But the one massive improvement from November with this team is their intent is back up to a very high level. Their energy, their aggression, their breakdown work, more cohesive, and more speed of movement. So a lot of those parts
with ball in hand. With ball in hand as well,
yeah, in general, yeah. But I think they're showing a real aggression at the breakdown. There's a competitive fight and a spring back in their step. They needed it. It was a little bit flat in November. I think they're still not flowing fully, but I think there's a few things to work on. That first half performance against Scotland was so dominant, so aggressive, and so ruthless at times. I think maybe the ruthlessness is maybe on the scoreboard. They should have another 2 tries. And they're the things they've got to look at. I think with Ronan Kelleher getting held up over the line, he's got to pull back a little bit. There was that one in November in the World Cup. They're the little moments that you just need to make sure that you get that right when you have that momentum going forward. Caelan Doris scores a lot of tries, and he's such a brilliant line breaker. He gets held up as well. Okay, you can applaud the good defence and from Scotland, but I just feel if we're playing France and you get 2 chances in that 22, if you want to win the game, you're going to have to take them. Who knows? We'll see in a few weeks, but I was really impressed with the body language and the way they started that game. And look, there's always going to be a few mistakes. And funny enough, Ireland had only 42% possession. So for a team, bar the kind of just the 10, 15 minutes of the second half, when there was going to be an inevitable surge from Scotland, and it was nervy enough, Ireland found a way. They scored 2 more tries. They were able to withstand. So they don't panic, and I think that's a good strength of this team. There's good composure there. They had way less carries, less defenders beaten, less, not double the tackle, but not far from double the amount of tackles Scotland had to make, which is strange because normally Ireland are the ones with the ball for, they're up in the mid 50s or early 60s of possession. So a little change there with maybe the style of play. But they had a lot of big moments in the game, and it was it's a great start for Simon Easterby and for this team.
Matt, if we just touch on Scotland quickly, they managed to get themselves in the game after half-time, 17-11. Fair play to them. Darcy Graham, Finn Russell incidents, and thankfully they're both recovering okay. Finn Russell actually passed his HA, but couldn't remember the moves. I'm pretty sure Gregor Townsend said to himself and Peter Horne decided, and rightly so, he should never come back on the pitch. I suppose it comes down to the bench issue and how many backs and forwards you put on it, your overall summation of it. And thankfully, firstly, safety is paramount, and they made the right call. But as a coach, it comes back to the bench calls.
Yeah, Stuart. It's look, whenever, and we're getting so immune to this now since the last World Cup when South Africa started going 6-2 on their bench and 7-1. We're not even saying anything about it. I go on about it, so I sort of think I got to stop saying this because people are going to get sick of hearing it, even though it's true. When you go with the 6-2 bench, there's a whole lot of other reasons that I've spoken about. But one of the other reasons is you're rolling the dice on your back's not getting hurt. You go a 7-1 bench, mate, you are really rolling the dice that no one gets hurt. And no one wants to see what happened on Saturday. I'm not suggesting that in any way. That was awful. And on Sunday, rather, no one wants to see that. But accidents happen in our game. It's a body contact sport. 2 guys competing, going for the ball in the same team collide. And they didn't have a trained 10 on their bench. Now, if you go with a 5-3 bench, that would happen. Usually you have an out half, that someone can play out half on your bench so you can step in. When you go with a 6-2, they chose not to. They had a half, a scrum half, and an outside back. Now, if that was a scrum, that wouldn't happen because World Rugby says you've got to have front rowers. I just can't believe World Rugby hasn't stepped in on this particular point since South Africa went 7-1 and everyone's going 6-2, and Ireland Ireland went 5-3. But that game was over at that point. And I don't understand why.
Matt, they're 12 can't play 10. Played a lot for Glasgow, won a URC with them, and Stafford McDowell come on. So I suppose they had that option, and that's what they did in the end.
They did, but it's very different to having a trained 10, isn't it? You look at the Ireland bench, and every 5-3 bench, usually you go with a trained 10. Now, so they did it, but that game was effectively over at that point. Scotland were never going to win that game from then on. And I just, this problem is so easily solved. We're talking about it for a couple of years now. All they have to say is you've got to have 3 recognised trained backs on your bench. There can't be a forward who can play in the backs. Just have 3 backs on the bench. We do it with the front row. If they did, all of this conversation would be over. It's such a simple solve. And I felt for Gregor. He rolled the dice and he got bitten. He's the only one so far to get bitten by this. But, that's what happens. It ruined the game as a spectacle, and it cost Scotland any chance of competing in the end, especially when you're, not just losing Russell's brilliance, but not having someone that could conduct the team as they needed to when you're playing a top team like Ireland. Because Scotland believed they were right, in the championship, but as soon as that injury occurred and they didn't have the suitably trained player, I thought it was all over Red Rover, and it proved to be correct. And I think until we get to that point where World Rugby starts saying you do have to have 3 suitably trained backs as part of your 7, we're going to be up. This option that we saw on Saturday is going to be a constant in the game, and that's a shame. because it's easily solved.
Okay, interesting. Alan, the last one on Ireland, which I want to touch on, which you talked about earlier. Less possession, 44%, did you say? And they're winning games?
42%, yeah.
42%. More kicking or just defensively? But defensively, they were so solid. Have you seen a slight tweak in their defence compared to the autumn into the Six Nations?
Funny enough, kicks in play at Ireland at 24 and Scotland at 18. The numbers are much higher. They were in the 30s for Ireland, England. Both in the 30s for England, France and Twickenham. I think it was 38, 34. So they both kicked a lot there. I think good kicking can be exciting as well, particularly.
Yeah. Well, it was on Saturday.
Well, particularly if you go up and win the ball back, and then you can launch some attack off it. And obviously, with the new law change, where you've got to get out of that space and you can't escort and block people off, it's making it a very effective weapon. So when you look at the amount of kicking for Ireland, Scotland, it wasn't anything dramatic. Look, I don't think there's a massive change. I think the territory is 53% for Ireland. So even though less possession, they're in the right area a lot of the time with that possession. Line breaks, they had 6 line breaks, Scotland had 4. So they used their ball efficiently and found space and created a lot of stuff. 13 defenders beaten, that's not a big number for Ireland. Scotland at 25. So some of those stats, look, they can be misleading at times. I think, but I think we're seeing a little shift of maybe not, and I've said this a few times, sometimes we've overplayed a little bit in our own half. So it's about getting down into the opposition half quicker. No dramatic changes. And we've seen Leinster probably do that a little bit more, try to get down into the opposition half, squeeze penalties, put pressure on, and not overplay in your own half. So a little bit of that coming into the Irish game. And look, if it's worked and it's been positive, and it's probably more efficient on what they're trying to do, because we have a lot of a brace of footballers. Doris, Van der Fleer. I thought James Ryan was outstanding on Sunday. His chop tackling ability, his
line out steals,
his nuisance ability at the breakdown, he's just physical presence. Ty Byrne was exceptional as well. So you want your loose forwards there in the mix, in upsetting the opposition and coming up with big plays, and they all did. So yeah, a little bit of a change in the approach there. I think the missed tackles are 25. For me, that's a little bit high for this team. Our scramble defense is, again, and was really good. But so there's a few things to work on for sure. But I think the game is over at 17-0. And if we're being honest, I think they'd be quite disappointed with the concession of the 2 tries. You know, the one before half time. You know, we have a scrum, 30 seconds left on the clock. Just play that out. Caelan Doris, it's a wrong call because it doesn't work out for him. They give away a penalty. Scrum wasn't settled and he breaks in field. Rory Darge does really well to make the tackle. The pressure comes. They get a penalty, and then Van der Merwe scores a few minutes later off that, and it gives them a lifeline. I think Ireland should be disappointed with that. And I think the Ben White one as well, they should be disappointed with. I think it's soft, you know, scrum half kind of barging over from there, shouldn't happen. So, you know, when they're looking at it, they'll be probably a little bit disappointed with both of those. But overall, you know, look, going to Scotland, going to Murrayfield against a team who, to be fair, they weren't talking this one up. There wasn't a lot of noise out of, and there probably wasn't before. Sometimes it's created by outside influences, social media, all that stuff. And it's more probably social media. I have never heard Gregor Townsend or any of the Scottish players saying we're going to beat Ireland at the weekend. They're very frustrated, I think, with the run of results. But it just kind of reminded people of the quality that this team currently possess. And they were pretty aggressive and strong and physical. And that first half it laid the platform for a victory. And, Andrew Porter was outstanding as well. James Lowe, for a guy who's out injured since November, he's come back and he's just hit the ground running. He's been brilliant in the first 2 games. Gibson Park, outstanding as well. So they're getting a lot of big performances, and maybe the good news for Ireland now is that Tyke Furlong and Joe McCarthy will be back in the mix for the second half of the championship, which would be an incredible boost for them.
11 defeats in a row for the Scots against Ireland. We'll leave that chat there. Matt, the crunch Saturday evening, Twickenham, Allianz Arena, or Allianz Park, I should say. Last play of the game, Elliot Daly, and the kick from Finn Smith. It was just such a good atmosphere for a game. We were in studio, obviously. But Borthwick, he'll be relieved, but fair play to them. They went with the 10-15 with Finn and Marcus. How did you feel it went? And also probably the quietest game in a long time. Anton Dupont has been kept. He was hushed out, wasn't he?
Yeah, it was true. It was interesting, like as Alan was describing the first half of the Irish performance against Scotland, France did the same thing, except they dropped the last pass 4 times. It could well have been at halftime, 28-7 to France. Dupont dropped the ball, the line wide open. Bill Berry dropped the ball. Penno dropped the ball. He was probably going to score himself. He had Bill Berry with him. So, like that let England back into the game. And to be fair to the English, they took their chances. They started to believe the French errors. They started thinking maybe we got a shot here, because in the first half they didn't. And Finn Smith at 10, I think, has been a real find for them. I thought he played exceptionally well. He took the ball to the line. His actions on the last try in the last minute of the game, the match-winning try, was superb. If you watch him, he took the ball to the line, he double pumped, he drew in Barassi, and that created the space there. He took the ball to the line well. I hate saying this because I always feel like I'm bashing up Marcus Smith. Marcus is not a fullback, and it's not his fault. And he made a number of errors. Dropped the ball twice, let the ball bounce far too often instead of catching it on the full. Got stripped one-on-one by Bill Berry. That should have been another try in the second half. How France didn't score off that steal is it was a miracle for England. And then Marcus, people forget, when you're at fullback, you do almost double the running. We know that by the computers the guys wear on their bodies, on their back. The fullback does almost double the amount of meters of a 10 in a match. Not quite, but close to. And Marcus must have been exhausted. You saw those 2 penalty kicks he jagged. Now, 9 times out of 10, he kicks them well. They didn't come off his foot well at all. That tells you about his physical and mental state, having to play out of position. And I think that was really unfair on him, because he hasn't played a lot of fullback, and to be thrown at international level is tough. But the team, the English team, showed a lot of resilience, and that was good for the competition, good for England. I haven't got the stat in front of me, but I think it was 13 of their last 15 games have been won or lost by single digits. So
it sounds about right. It sounds about right.
Yeah, they go right back to the New Zealand tour, where they were pushed New Zealand very close. They lost both tests, but they pushed the New Zealanders very tight. So that is good for England. Is that bad for Ireland? Well, it puts Ireland in a funny situation with this, Stu, because France scored 45 points to 0 against Wales. Now, if France beat Ireland, that statistic comes into play, because if they're on the same amount of points, competition points, that is, for and against comes into play. So Ireland have to go to Cardiff and put in a really strong performance, because France will be putting all their money into the basket that if they come and beat Ireland in Dublin, that points difference will hold them in good stead. So while Ireland are still in line for the Grand Slam and France aren't, it's sort of picked. It means 2 weeks in Cardiff is very important time. I'm talking to you from France, and the media they have been smashing Fabian Galtier. He is popping it in the neck over here, blaming him for the substitutions, taking Dupont out, putting him at 10 and not leaving him at 9, bringing the young players onto the field too early, because it was the 2 restarts after France scored both their tries, or a penalty goal and that great try that Bill Berry scored late in the so I think it was a 76th minute or 75th and some seconds minute. They dropped both restarts, and that gave England possession in their own half. And of course, it was one of the bench players who dropped the restart. What's the coach supposed to do? It's a tough one, but the lack of accuracy by France in the first half cost them the game. We said on the TV, France lost that game, England didn't win it, and that's not being derogatory to the English. I thought they showed great desire and composure, especially at the end, to win that game. And they put the pressure back on France, and France cracked right at the end. Why Barassi at outside centre jammed in, then he had no need to jam in. You could actually see the covering tackle was done by Dupont, who was playing at 10. They had 3 players covering 2 English defenders. And if Barassi stayed out, he makes the tackle. Now, England might have scored in the subsequent plays, but they certainly shouldn't have scored off that first play.
Matt, it's quite interesting there you talk about Fabian Galtier under the microscope and getting plenty of pressure. The next 3 games, surely they're pivotal for him. The fact that they keep coming second in this championship, what have they done 4 out of the last 5 years?
Yeah.
They didn't deliver in the World Cup. Yes, they lost to South Africa, who went on to win it in probably one of the best test matches going in a quarter-final. But what's the sort of end game for him? Yes, if he wins in Dublin, they win the championship. It's all happy days. But if they don't, is it a situation where they keep carrying on with him to 2027? But this French squad from the outside, it's star-studded, and they aren't getting the results at the high end. Sure, they're not. And the trophies.
Yeah, sure, you can't argue with those facts, can you? You can't argue with those facts. We could mount the same argument for Leinster, or against Leinster. The great team performing. We know they're doing well. They do a whole lot of things, but they haven't got much or anything to show on the trophy cabinet for all that talent. So it's a similar scenario for the French. I think Galtier. I think Galtier is a fantastic coach. I know the players love what he's doing. They're playing a great brand of rugby. He's brought French rugby. If we think back to, just the World Cup in Japan, it's not that long ago. That French team were not playing great rugby. They weren't playing French rugby the way we would want France to play. They were playing, and for a decade there, that French national team had dropped completely off the radar. He has brought them back to playing a beautiful brand of rugby based on Toulouse and now Bordeaux, with the team selected from those players playing a really gorgeous brand. But there's no doubt they're not winning. So I agree with you. I think it's a really crucial 3 games for him. I think he should stay to the next World Cup. I believe that's what he wants. But there's other sides to Galtier, the way he's, just the way the media are picking up on him because of the way he looks. He wears those glasses, his private life, things like this that they're all picking up on, which really has got nothing to do whether he's a good coach or a bad coach. It's very unfair on Fabian in so many ways. But I putting all that aside, it's what Quinny said before about what Wales have done to Gaddy. It's a results-driven business. But the question would be, who do they have to replace him? So what coach can they bring in that would change the fortunes of that side? And was it a coach-related issue? So, the French side make 3 distinct breaks in the first half where all they have to do is a catch and pass and they score tries. And the players don't execute it. The best player in the world, Antoine Dupont, drops the ball cold. Now, it wasn't a great pass. That's not the coach's fault. But he will ultimately be held responsible. But I think if they win in Dublin, in the second last in that round, all's forgiven. If they don't, yeah, I think there's going to be a strong post-mortem.
Alan, just picking up on that, are you with France not being ruthless enough? Or sometimes you just have a bad day and everything doesn't click and you end up paying the cropper and losing, and that's what happened against England?
I think a little bit of bad luck for some of.
Do you feel they've underachieved though, France?
Well, I think with the players they have, I think he's made, as Matt said, they've made significant improvements. There was a number of years where France were so up and so down at times, and if you brought intensity to your performance against them, you get a result, because they probably weren't fit enough, they probably weren't coached well enough, they weren't able to live with opposition being really intense against them and holding on to the ball for long periods of time. Sean Edwards has made a big difference as a coach with them. You know, you hear players talk about him over the years. It's about getting back up off the ground, making another tackle, putting pressure at the breakdown, sprinting back and the kick retreat, all that kind of stuff. France have improved in all that stuff. They'll always have natural talent, athletic, powerful, unbelievably skillful players. So they've put that together, and were really unfortunate at the World Cup. I think they were like Ireland, just a whisker away from it being a France-Ireland final, as opposed to New Zealand-South Africa one. So very small margins. I don't think they've healed and recovered from that World Cup, because there was so much expectation would have been at home. And they need to win things. I think that the French public, Matt lives there, they're fairly impatient, and Media Olympic and all these papers are having a cut off from the last few days. So they need to, the sad part for them on Saturday evening is this Grand Slam dream is gone. You know, they've DuPont, Intimac back. Last year they didn't have them. So it's a hammer blow. So there's a little bit of a squeeze on Fabian Galtier. I just think they were very unlucky the other day. They obviously have that flair and natural ambition to play and try offloads and throw passes, and like they could have scored when they turned England over near their own line and Pinot goes quick and they nearly scored the other end of the field. It would have been one of the best tries you'll ever see. So it's very small margins. I think they're incredibly powerful and dangerous. And they're missing about 5 or 6 potential starters here in Charles Olivon, Taoufik Fanua, Jalange could start as well, Jonathan Dante, Gail Fiku. You know, there's a lot of power and experience.
And Mike wasn't playing?
Yeah, there's probably 5 or 6 players there that could make them incredibly strong. Their bench, even though it brings incredible youthful enthusiasm, is still quite inexperienced. And I think the bench made a difference on Saturday for England. And a bit of calmness, good decision-making. But look, they have such an array of talent they can choose from. You know, that's the reality. We often talk about the Irish depth chart. And Fabian Galtier has capped a fair few players since the World Cup. So, yeah, I think there's a bit of pressure on them now to come to Dublin and win that game. And that'll be an incredible match in a few weeks.
Before they play Ireland, though, they have the Italians in Rome. And Matt, the final part of the pod we'll touch on. Watch out for the Italians. Beating the Wales as you expected, but this expectation tag, part 1's done. Yes, they'll play France. Very tricky for them. But I think you're impressed by them as they keep sort of building and on this journey.
Yeah, absolutely, Stu. Like, you know, how many years were we saying they were terrible? It's bad for the tournament. You know, it's a give me game. That's not the case anymore, and that's because the Italian rugby has done all the things below their national team that we're saying Welsh rugby hasn't. You know, their academy system has been very, very well set up by an Irishman, Steve Aboud. They've put together, you know, even though their professional teams aren't at the top end, that they are trying to do those in. And that the other part is they're selecting their players really well. I think Casada has done a very, very good job on his selection process. They haven't got the strongest 23 players in the tournament, but you know, he's been consistent. They've got a good defensive system. They're trying to hang on there too. Maurice Goosen, their defensive coach, done a great job. The big thing I love about them is they're attacking from set plays. So they're gone back to saying that the scrum is the best attacking platform in the game. They're not. They probably don't have the pack to scrum for penalties. Now that's provided us as watchers with a bit of joy, because their attack from scrums is pretty close to the best in the tournament. You know, they scored a beautiful try on Saturday. Now the Welsh defence was bad. I take that. That's not the Italians' fault. Italians can only attack what the defence does to them, and he has put that into that side. So when France come to town into Rome in the next round, the mindset for the Italians is different, because they'll be underdogs again. Last week was probably the first time, gee whiz, Al, like you got to go right back to the turn of the century when that good Italian side was there with Dominguez and so on.
Well, 07 was the last time they beat Wales in Rome. So
yeah, and that when they had that really good side with Dominguez and a lot of those that good quality team, Cicero and those guys that were in the front row, great players. They could sometimes be favourites in Rome, but this generation has never experienced that. So that was the first time they went into a game and said, we're expected to win. And to be fair to the Italians, I think the first penalty goal was kicked in about the 6th minute or the 5th minute. They led that game from the 5th minute to full time. Wales never got in front. And that's also got to be the first time that I can remember they've done that in the Six Nations. So, you know, that's a lot of ground-breaking stuff for a young side, and for Lamaro as captain. And I thought he had a good game as well. But now they come back to France, and they'll push France because there's nothing to lose. And there's pressure on France. France will still win it because they've got too much class. But it's not the games that it was in the past. Remember, last year they drew with France. So it's a very, very different proposition than what we saw last week. Again, I think that's fabulous for the tournament. A highly competitive Italian side is great for the championship.
Well, we will preview round 3 next week. Ireland going to Cardiff with Wales having a new boss. They're actually having that meeting as we speak, so it'll be interesting what comes out of that, who will take charge for coming in for Warren Gatland. Alan, just before we go, anyone impressed you over the first couple of rounds? We haven't even touched on the Lions. I was thinking about it, but I'm not going to ask for your 37 or 38 squad now. But over the last couple of weeks, is there anyone put their hand up and said, outside of half the Irish team, but you know what I'm saying?
There's one player, there's a lot of the Irish players have, I think, which has been very helpful, and it's very timely. One player has jumped out for me in the first 2 rounds is Tom Curry. I think he's reminded everyone he's a world-class player. He's just phenomenal. His work rate, his strength, his power, his carrying ability. I think he was sensational in the first 2 games. For me, I would have given him player of the match on Saturday at Twickenham.
Me too, 100%.
He just made so many. You just give him that energy, that fight. When you're a player, then you look and you go, geez, I got to get moving. Look at him again. Charging, blocking down, tackling guys, poaching. So, yeah, he's the one that's really kind of enhanced his reputation again as regards. And, of course, Finn Smith now will come into the mix as regards potentially this line situation, because...
Figure 3 Lions 10s.
Well, Finn Russell is the one that's probably the front runner at the moment. So if you look
Sam P, does Sam P go?
Well, if he keeps playing and Ireland do well, of course he's going to be in the mix. I think Ireland could end up changing. You know, Jack Crowley could start against France. Who knows? Then you're kind of going, that's a debate for another day, because you're going and you're changing up the attack. I think we saw the strengths of Sam Prendergast the other day, running right at the line.
Do you really think Jack Crowley could start against the French?
Pardon?
Do you really think Jack Crowley could start against the French?
They may do that. You know, it's a different sort of power and physicality that you're going to get. But look, then is that a kind of a? I have to be careful what way I say this, because then are you taking away that little silky kind of attacking ability that he has a little bit. Not that Jack Crowley doesn't have good attack, but I think the big strength that Prendergast has is that silky hands and that ability to pull passes and all that kind of stuff. Look, I don't know. It could happen. we'll see what they do against Wales and Cardiff if they make a couple of changes. I think it'll be very minimal. I think it'll be a couple of people off the bench, so I wouldn't be expecting any sort of dramatic changes. But yeah, of course, if Ireland do well and win the championships, he has to come into the mix. There's no real standouts. I think Finn Smith, Finn Russell, and Sam Prendergast are probably three at the moment that would be going after 2 rounds, and you know, that's the way it's at. But you asked me the question. Tom Curry, he's been outstanding. I think Jack Conan for Ireland and Andrew Porter are two that jump out at me kind of quickly without putting a lot of thought into it. I think Porter has really had a big 2 games and reminded people of his quality as well. And of course, Jack Conan, he won't want to be an impact person off the bench, but he's timing his run perfect. He went in the last Lions tour, and you know, even if he's not starting.
I think we got the guts of what Alan was going to say. Matt, a final word to you?
Considers, yeah, there's a lot of rugby to be played between now and then.
Yeah, it's true. Quinny's put it all. I tell you what I've loved to see. I've loved seeing the torpedo punt come back into our game off.
Haven't we all?
He's been kicking the ball beautifully.
Sparrows everywhere.
Yes, and a couple of those ones on Saturday. Seeing the ball turned on an angle again and the thing spinning through the air, it was great. So what does that mean? All young kids around Ireland are going to go out to the greens this week and try and torp the ball, and that's fantastic. We need it back.
Got to bring the low spiral back as well, Matt.
Oh yeah, it's good. Brilliant. I agree. Curry's been outstanding. He's in front. What's astounded me is that if you had said to me last November, would we be talking about Sam Prendergast and Finn Smith as potential line 10s in a serious conversation? I'd say there's no way. But Alan's right. It's Finn Russell and those two. There's no one from Wales going. Both of them are in front of Marcus Smith, who I don't think I'd take on the tour right now with the form he's in. But I would certainly have Russell, but I would also have Jack in front of him. So Quinny's point about can Jack play? Jack can play anywhere. He's been fantastic, and it's interesting they brought him on at fullback. You know, I criticised Borthwick for putting Smith at fullback. I think they're also looking at how do we get both of these players onto the field at the same time. What happens if we lose Keenan? What do we do? How do we go about it? So there's some interesting discussions going on with that. I also thought Sheehan off the bench. You know, we know he's been out long term. He's the best hooker. He's the best hooker in the tournament. Full stop. He's mate. You could argue Mavaka and is equally a fantastic, and he is a fantastic. But that's a discussion to have. He's the starting hooker for the Lions right now. It's a matter of time till he starts for Ireland. It's not saying anything against Kelleher. Kelleher's a superb player, but Sheehan's close to the best hooker in the world, right up there with the discussions about the South Africans and Mavaka. He's in that discussion. So they're just off the top of my head, a few of them there. Gibson Park, the best 9 by a country mile as well.
Great stuff, Matt and Alan, as always, and we'll be back next week ahead of Cardiff as Ireland take on Wales in round 3.